The room was suffocating, not from heat, but from the overwhelming pressure of money, power, and ego. It was full of billionaire executives, foreign investors with sharp eyes and sharper suits, and architectural projects worth millions spread across the mahogany table like a map of the future. The scent of expensive imported coffee mixed with the sterile, cold air conditioning that kept the room at a freezing temperature, a sharp contrast to the tropical heat of São Paulo outside. Inside this glass aquarium overlooking Paulista Avenue, lives were about to be decided. But then the impossible happened. The heavy oak doors creaked open, not for a waiter or a secretary, but for a disruption that no one could have predicted. A poor, dirty boy suddenly entered. His presence was like a stain on a white canvas. He walked past the shocked faces, his bare feet making no sound on the plush carpet, and pointed a trembling, grime-covered finger to the painting on the easel. He looked at the most powerful men in the country and said calmly, "These calculations are wrong." The silence that followed was deafening. Then the millionaire in charge, a man who had never been told no, felt his face flush. He fell on his face, metaphorically, his arrogance punctured. The whole room erupted. They laughed together, a cruel, unified sound of dismissal. They laughed until the boy proved something that would not only save the company from bankruptcy, but would also change the life of that man forever. Before we dive into this incredible story, please subscribe to our channel. We bring to life the memories and voices that never had space, but that carry the wisdom of a lifetime. I will tell you this story from the very beginning, detailing every moment of this miraculous encounter. It was 10 in the morning on a Tuesday, a day that started like any other for Roberto, but would end as the most important day of his existence. Roberto was the CEO of one of Brazil's largest construction firms. He was a man made of steel and numbers, and today, he was closing the deal of his life, an $800 million shopping mall project in partnership with a group of skeptical American investors. The boardroom was a fortress of solitude high above the chaos of the city. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the traffic of Paulista Avenue looked like toy cars. Inside, everything was perfect. The water bottles were aligned with military precision. The lighting was designed to make the architectural renderings pop. Everyone was in a tailored suit, speaking in low, confident tones. And suddenly, that boy appeared. He stood in the doorway, a jarring anomaly. He looked small, fragile, and utterly out of place. His clothes were oversized, stained with the gray dust of the streets and the grease of engine oil. His hair was matted, and his face was smudged with dirt. But it was his smell that hit them first. The scent of rain, old cardboard, and the harsh reality of the streets invading the perfumed air of the boardroom. "How did this boy get in here?" Roberto shouted, slamming his hand on the table. His face turned red with anger, a vein pulsating in his forehead. The disruption was unacceptable. "Security! Where is security?" The cleaning lady, Mrs. Helena, appeared trembling at the door, her face pale with terror. She wrung her hands in her apron, eyes darting between her boss and the boy. "Sorry, doctor. He asked me to get some cardboard from the recycling bin in the back, and I left the service door open for a second. I turned my back, and he just ran in." "Cardboard?" Roberto gave a dry, cruel laugh that echoed off the glass walls. He looked at the investors, trying to turn the moment into a joke to save face. "Do you think this office is a recycling plant? Do you think this is old iron? Get this boy out of here before I call the police myself." The boy did not move. He didn't flinch at the shouting. He didn't look at Mrs. Helena or the terrified investors. He stood his ground, rooted to the spot. He must have been about 12 years old, though malnutrition made him look younger. His dirty clothes hung off his thin frame like rags, but his eyes were different. Beneath the grime and the messy hair, his dark eyes shone with an intensity that was almost unsettling. They were focused, intelligent, and fiercely observant. He took a step forward, ignoring Roberto's rage. He pointed a thin, dirty finger directly at the large rendering of the shopping mall displayed on the easel. It was a complex diagram filled with structural loads, topographical lines, and area calculations. "You made a mistake," the boy said, his voice quiet but steady. "The land is not 12,000 square meters. Roberto blinked, taken aback by the audacity. Excuse me? It has 9,500, the boy continued, tracing a line on the air with his finger. If you build it the way it is in the project, the mall will fall. The foundation cannot support the weight distribution on the reduced area. For a second, there was silence. Then, laughter erupted. It started with Roberto, a barking, dismissive sound, and quickly spread to the engineers and the American investors. They laughed at the absurdity. A street kid telling a room full of PhDs and industry titans that their multi-million-dollar project was structurally unsound. Roberto wiped a tear of laughter from his eye, looking at the boy with pure mockery. Did you hear that, gentlemen? Apparently, we have a structural engineer in diapers here. Tell me, kid, did you learn that sleeping on the sidewalk? The laughter continued, loud and humiliating. But the boy didn't lower his head. He didn't cry. He just stared at the numbers on the board with a terrifying certainty. And suddenly the laughter died down. It didn't stop naturally. It faded because the boy's unwavering gaze made them uncomfortable. The room fell silent. A heavy silence, the kind you feel pressing against your chest before a storm. The smiles vanished from the Americans' faces. They looked at each other, sensing a strange tension. Roberto felt a bead of cold sweat run down his forehead, though he didn't know why. He tried to regain control. Who do you think you are to come in here and speak nonsense? Who sent you? A competitor? Lucas, the boy said calmly. My name is Lucas Silva. He paused, looking around the room, taking in the luxury he had never known. I live back there, on the street behind this building, with my mother. We sleep under the marquees of the bakery. I learned math alone. Alone? One of the Americans asked, his accent heavy, eyebrow raised. With books that I find in the trash, Lucas replied. People throw away so much knowledge. Encyclopedias, textbooks, manuals, I read them all. One of the American investors, Mr. Davies, a man known for his ruthlessness in business, but also for his sharp intellect, stood up slowly. He adjusted his glasses and looked from the boy to the board. He reached for his silver calculator. Let me check, Davies muttered. Roberto scoffed. Davies, please, don't waste your time. It's a beggar. Let me check, Davies repeated, his voice icy. The room watched in suspended animation. The only sound was the rhythmic clicking of Davies's fingers against the calculator keys. Click, click, click. He looked at the blueprints. He looked at the topography report. He punched in more numbers. Lucas stood still, his hands clasped behind his back, waiting. 2 minutes passed. They felt like 2 hours. Finally, Mr. Davies stopped. He stared at the small LCD screen of his calculator. He blinked, frowned, and calculated it again. Then, he slowly lifted his head and looked at Roberto with the face of someone who had just seen a ghost. His complexion was pale. The child is right, Davies whispered. Roberto felt the floor disappear beneath his feet. What? The project is wrong, Roberto, Davies said, his voice rising in disbelief. The topographical triangulation is off. The area calculation assumed a straight boundary line on the south side, but the coordinates indicate a curvature. The usable area is exactly 9,500 square meters. If we had poured the foundation for a 12,000-meter structure, the stress on the support beams would have been catastrophic. The building would have collapsed within a year. Roberto gasped, gripping the edge of the table. How so? I have a team of 20 engineers, the best in Brazil. How could a street kid be right? Impossible. You don't even have a study. He shouted at Lucas, desperate to find a flaw. Lucas reached into his oversized, dirty shirt and pulled out a notebook. It wasn't a moleskin or a digital tablet. It was a stack of crumpled papers, napkins, and the backs of flyers, all sewn together with a piece of string. He opened the notebook quickly. Look. Roberto and Davies leaned in. The pages were covered in dense, frantic handwriting. It was a chaotic masterpiece of logic. There were calculations for everything: geometry, trigonometry, calculus, even differential equations that looked like university-level physics. I wake up at 5 a.m. every day, Lucas explained, his voice gaining strength. I go to the municipal school gate and I look through the window. The teachers can't let me in because I don't have a document. I don't have a birth certificate. I don't have a home address, but I listen. I watch the chalkboard from the outside, and I write everything down. He turned a page, showing a complex drawing of a bridge. My mother can't read. She doesn't know what these symbols mean. But she always said to me, "Lucas, you are smart. Your mind is your only weapon. Use that head to get out of this life." So I study, every day, with what I find thrown away in the bins of office buildings like this one. The room was completely silent now. Mrs. Helena was crying softly, leaning against the door frame, her hand covering her mouth. Even the security guard, a burly man who had finally arrived to drag the boy out, stopped in the middle of the hallway, lowering his radio. He couldn't move. No one could. Roberto felt something strange in his chest. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't fear. It was shame. A deep, burning shame that he had never felt in his 45 years of life. He looked at his Italian suit, his gold watch, his manicured hands, and then he looked at Lucas's dirty fingernails pointing at a mathematical truth that had saved them all. "Wait," Roberto said, his voice hoarse. He raised his hand to stop the security guard. "Don't touch him." He turned back to the boy. "How much did you say the land really has?" 9,500 square meters, Lucas repeated without hesitation. "You measured it with a modern GPS, but you didn't check the old writing, the original deed from the 1950s. The land was divided 40 years ago. There is a part, a strip along the back, that actually belongs to the city hall. It is registered in an old public register." "How do you know that?" Roberto asked, astounded. "I saw it when I went to pick up a piece of paper in the public archive to draw on," Lucas shrugged. "They throw a lot of paper away there. I saw the map. I memorized it because I sleep near there." Davies, the American investor, hit the table with his fist. "My God, this boy saved our investment. Roberto, do you realize what happened here? If we found out this after the work started, we would have to halt construction, demolish the foundation, and redesign everything. It would be 200 million reais in loss. We would be bankrupt." Roberto swallowed dry. His throat felt like sandpaper. He looked at Lucas properly for the first time. He didn't see a street rat anymore. He saw a prodigy. And he saw something else. Dignity. The boy didn't look like someone who wanted to humiliate the rich men. He looked like someone who just wanted to help because he knew the truth. And Roberto had treated him like garbage. "Lucas," Roberto's voice came out weak, cracking with emotion. He walked around the massive table and knelt down on one knee, ruining his suit pants on the floor, just to be at eye level with the boy. "I'm sorry. I was very rude to you. I was blind." The boy shook his shoulders, a gesture of wisdom beyond his years. "You are not the first, sir. Everyone looks at me and only sees dirt. They see the clothes, the bare feet. But my mother says that God sees the heart. And math. Math doesn't care if you are rich or poor. The numbers are the same for everyone." That's when Roberto made a decision that would change everything. The arrogance melted away, replaced by a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in decades. "You will study," Roberto declared, standing up. "Really study. Not through a window. Not with garbage." I can't pay," Lucas whispered. "You won't pay," Roberto said firmly. "I will pay for the best private school in São Paulo. I will hire tutors for you. And more. You will work here with me as an apprentice until you are 18 years old. Then you will get a permanent position as a consultant. You will earn a salary starting today." Roberto turned to his secretary. "Get the real estate agent on the phone. Lucas, you will have an apartment, fully furnished, for you and your mother to live in. No more sleeping under the bakery marquise." He then looked at the cleaning lady, who was still weeping at the door. "And Mrs. Helena." "Yes, sir?" She sniffled, terrified she was about to be fired. "You will receive an increase of 50% immediately, and a promotion to head of facilities management. It was you who brought this genius here, even by accident. You opened the door." Lucas's eyes widened. He looked at Roberto, trying to gauge if this was a cruel joke. Are you serious? I've never been so serious in my life, Roberto replied. The Americans, usually so stoic, stood up and applauded. It wasn't a polite golf clap, it was genuine applause. Mrs. Helena cried openly, and Lucas, for the first time in years, smiled. It wasn't a guarded smile, it was a beam of pure light that illuminated that expensive room more than any crystal chandelier ever could. The following week, Roberto called an emergency meeting. The atmosphere was different this time. Lucas was there. He was unrecognizable. He wore new clothes, a simple, clean button-down shirt and jeans. His hair was cut neatly. He looked like any other child, except for the intensity in his eyes and the object in his hand. He still held the same old notebook made of trash paper. He didn't want to throw it away. It's my story, he had told Roberto. It reminds me where I came from. The whole engineering team was tense. Roberto had gathered the 20 engineers responsible for the shopping project, men with degrees from the best universities in the world. Lucas, you can start, Roberto said, sitting back in his chair. The boy walked to the painting. He moved without fear now, no shame. He took the marker pen and started drawing over the professional blueprints. The problem is not just the size of the terrain, Lucas began, his voice clear. There's more. The scale of the hydraulic project is wrong. He spoke for 15 minutes without interruption. He showed 7 critical mistakes. He pointed out that the airflow in the parking garage would trap carbon monoxide. He showed that the electrical load for the cinema complex was underestimated by 20%. These mistakes, Lucas concluded, tapping the board, would cost not 200 but 340 million Rs to fix later. And the garage ventilation issue. People could have died. Mistakes that no one, absolutely no one on the team of highly paid experts had seen. The chief engineer, a 50-year-old man with 3 master's degrees, sat pale, sweating profusely. How did you learn about ventilation systems? The chief engineer stammered. Civil engineering book, Lucas replied simply. I found it in the trash behind the municipal library 3 years ago. It was torn, missing the cover, but I could read the chapters on fluid dynamics. If you're enjoying the story, please remember to subscribe to the channel. We are approaching an ending that will warm your heart. Silence fell over the room. An embarrassing, heavy silence. Roberto stood up. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. Guys, I gathered you here today to say one thing. We are a billionaire company. We have cutting-edge technology. We have diplomas on every wall. And we almost lost 340 million reais and risked human lives because of haste and arrogance. And a 12-year-old boy who lived on the street saved us. He paused, letting the words sink in. This is not just a warning. It's a shame. And it will change. From now on, the whole project goes through Lucas. All of it. Even the little details. The team didn't know whether to applaud or resign. 3 engineers, their egos too bruised to take orders from a child, quit the next day. But those who stayed learned the biggest lesson of their lives. Intelligence has no zip code. Wisdom doesn't require a diploma. Lucas not only corrected projects, he revolutionized the company. He brought a perspective they lacked. He created a triple verification system using logic he developed solving puzzles on scrap paper. He saved 15 million in the first month just by optimizing the delivery routes for the cement trucks, something he figured out by watching traffic patterns from the street corner. At 13 years old, he was teaching interns twice his age. And his mother, Sandra, who had spent 10 years invisible to society, sleeping on cardboard, now worked at the company as a social worker. She walked the halls with her head held high, helping to identify other young people on the street with hidden talents, because Roberto had another idea, a big one. If there was a Lucas, Roberto told his board, there could be 100, 1,000. How many geniuses are we stepping over on the sidewalk every day? He created the Invisible Genius Project. Every Saturday, the company opened its glass doors to young people from the favelas and the streets. Mathematical workshops, programming, engineering, robotics, everything for free. And who taught? Lucas and other young people he himself chose. In 6 months, the project had 200 students. In 1 year, it had 1/500, and some of them were as brilliant as Lucas. There was a 15-year-old girl, Anna, who had never touched a computer before. Within months, she created an algorithm that reduced concrete waste by 30%. A 14-year-old boy, João, who redesigned the floor plan of a low-income housing building and saved enough space to add 2 extra floors of apartments without increasing the budget. The company became news worldwide, not for building the tallest buildings, but for building futures. Years later, the timeline brings us to a glittering moment in Dubai. Roberto took Lucas to the United Arab Emirates. The company had been selected to build a futuristic skyscraper in the middle of the desert. The competition had been fierce. Germans, Chinese, Japanese firms, everyone was there with their cutting-edge technology and centuries of experience. But who won? The Brazilian team, led by a young man who learned math in the trash. At the awards ceremony, under the golden lights of a grand hall, the sheik asked Roberto, "How did you do it? Your design is more efficient, more sustainable, and more beautiful than anything we have seen." Roberto smiled and stepped aside. "I didn't do it. He did." He called Lucas on stage. The boy was now a teenager, tall and confident in a tuxedo. He picked up the microphone. The audience waited for complex technical jargon. "I grew up with nothing," Lucas said, his voice echoing in the hall. "But I learned one thing. When you have no resources, you use your brain. When you have no money, you use creativity. We created a system that uses less material, pollutes less, and costs half the price because where I lived, we couldn't waste anything. No food, no paper, no space. Waste was a luxury we couldn't afford. So I brought that philosophy to this project." The audience stood up and applauded thunderously. Roberto cried. He cried not because of the contract, but because he remembered the day he almost expelled that boy. He cried because he realized he had almost lost the greatest blessing of his life due to his own blindness. But the story didn't end there. A few years later, the Invisible Genius Project evolved. It became a university, the Collaborative University Lucas Silva. It wasn't like Harvard or Oxford. There, young people from the community studied together with executives. Waste pickers studied with engineers. The idea was simple but revolutionary. Knowledge has no social class. And the best teachers? The students themselves. Who knew, taught. Who didn't know, learned. The model became a global reference for education. On the day the university was inaugurated, Roberto insisted on giving a speech. He stood at the podium, looking out at a sea of faces, rich, poor, black, white, young, old. "I was an arrogant billionaire," Roberto began, his voice shaking with honesty. "I thought money bought everything. I thought it bought intelligence, respect, even dignity. But a 12-year-old boy taught me that I was wrong. He taught me that the garbage of some is the treasure of others, that the world throws away what it can't see." He looked at Lucas, sitting in the front row next to his mother, Sandra. "Lucas didn't just change my company," Roberto said. "He changed my soul. He changed my life. And today, he's changing the world." Lucas walked up to the stage, hugged Roberto, and whispered in his ear, "You gave me the opportunity when no one else did. I'll never forget." Roberto held him tight. "And I'll never forget that I almost expelled you. You saved me, Lucas, not the other way around. Today, Lucas is a fully trained engineer and mathematician. He travels the world as an international lecturer. And do you know what he says when asked about his secret? "It's not a secret," he says. "It's an opportunity. There are millions of Lucas around the world right now, picking up trash, sleeping on the street, looking out the school window, wishing they could go inside. All that's missing is someone to open the door. Because talent doesn't choose an address. Talent just needs a chance." His mother, Sandra, today coordinates a massive shelter that welcomes 50 families, giving them the dignity she fought so hard to keep. Mrs. Helena, the cleaning lady who opened the door that fateful Tuesday, became the manager of the company's social responsibility department, leading a team of 50 people. And Roberto? He learned that being a billionaire means absolutely nothing if you don't see the value of those who have nothing. And it all started with a dirty, barefoot boy holding an old notebook made of trash. A boy the world ignored, but who didn't give up shining. And you? What did you think of this story? Did it change the way you look at the people around you? If this story moved you, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones. We have many more voices to share. Comment below which city you are from, and if you have ever met an invisible genius in your life. See you in the next story. Stay blessed.